Hey there, Joey here at School of Motion, and welcome to day 13 of 30 Days of After Effects. Today we're going to talk about something that's kind of one of these niche little effects that maybe is useful, maybe not, but what I really hope you learn from this video is how to approach problem solving in After Effects, because that is a far more useful skill than what we're actually going to be creating, which is 8-bit color cycling. If you were born in the 70s or 80s, then you have probably played computer games that used 8-bit color cycling. Because back in the good old days of adventure games, you really could only have 16, maybe 256 colors on screen at a time. So this was a technique that programmers used back then, and it looks really interesting. So I'm gonna show you how to do it in After Effects, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit about the process of problem solving in motion design. Also, don't forget to sign up for a free student account so you can grab the project files from this lesson, as well as assets from any other lesson on this site. All right, let's hop right in and get to it. So this is color cycling. And before I get too far into the tutorial, I wanna just point out that, this technique, I've never actually had to use it for any sort of paid work. I can't imagine really that many situations where you need to know how to do this. So the reason I'm making this tutorial, it's not just to show you a neat trick, because sometimes that's fun too. It's fun to just learn a neat trick. But what I'm hoping you'll get out of this is you'll have a little bit of a framework when it comes to figuring out how to do effects that you don't know how to do, that you've never done before. This effect I had never actually done in After Effects before, but I've sort of, I don't know, after years of using After Effects and a lot of practice and kind of banging my head against it, I've gotten pretty good at figuring out how to make effects. So I want to try and teach you guys a little bit about how my brain goes about doing that. Hopefully, this will help you when you have to do something like this. All right, so I got this idea. Actually, my friend Joe Russ, he posted something about Monkey Island today, and if you don't know what that is, Google it. It's one of the greatest computer games ever made. And it got me thinking. I had seen this website before. I can't remember when I saw it, but I'll link to it in the description. And what this is this artist, Mark Ferrari, who created this artwork, and it looks like it's moving, right? But if you look at the palette over here, you can actually see the trick that's creating the movement. And here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this cycle speed down to 1/4. And so now what you can see is that this artwork has all of these little layers to it, right? It's very deliberately created in such a way that when you cycle specific parts of the color palette, it creates this illusion of movement. And there's a whole bunch of cool examples here on this website. Let me turn this back up to normal speed, and you can kind of see here, it looks like the water is moving. If I come down here, it looks like, like a rippling pond, right? There's little raindrops. And this is all done with the same trick. If you look at the color palette, that's what it's doing, okay? It's cycling the palette. And so I said, okay, well, how do I do that in After Effects? And so what I started with, I'm gonna try and get through this part quick, because this part is not the interesting part, but what I started with was I just made a gradient, okay? So I made a new layer. I used the generate, and it's called a gradient ramp now. It's kind of the new word for it. It used to just be called ramp. So gradient ramp, right? Just creates this gradient. And then this is the trick and the key to the whole thing, really, okay? And from here, you might even be able to figure it out. You use this effect with a silly name. It's called Colorama. Colorama! And this is what it does. It takes an input, okay, and you can tell it what that input is. By default, it's the intensity. Intensity basically means the brightness of a pixel in conjunction with its transparency. So this layer has no transparency, so intensity is just how bright the pixel is, basically, okay? So here's the darkest pixel, here's the brightest pixel, everything in the middle is somewhere in between, and it maps that to an output cycle. And if we open that up, you can see this is the output cycle. So black gets mapped to this red, right? And then as we get darker, it slowly turns yellow, then green, then teal, then blue, then pink, and you can see that that's exactly what happens, okay? And if I move these colors around, you can see that it moves them around within this gradient. All it's doing is mapping the colors. Now the trick is, if I go back to this input phase section here, there's a phase shift. And watch what happens if I cycle this. Whoa, there we go. okay? So once I sort of figured this out, I said, okay, well, that's probably, I mean, that's clearly the trick. That's the trick right there. But how do you get it to look really good, right? How do you really get it to look, you know, I mean, not that this is like the most amazing example of color cycling ever, but it works, right? It looks like a waterfall and the ripples are working. And I want you to notice that, you know, this white part that sort of falls down the waterfall, it starts off slow and then it kind of feels like it speeds up as it falls. And that's deliberate, and I'll show you how I did that. So here's what we need to do. Let me delete this. What we need to do is first animate a waterfall. And so, you know, I spent a lot of time, you know, looking at this website, turning the cycle speed down to a quarter, and just sort of analyzing what the heck a waterfall looks like and how could I make that in a very simple way. This guy is a far better artist than me, so there's no way I could really recreate this, but here's what I figured out. I figured that, you know, a big sort of sheet of water falling, right? It starts off kind of shaped like an ellipse, right? And I don't want any strokes. Let me turn that off. Let me turn the fill back on here. Okay. It starts off like this. And then as it falls, right, it's going to sort of, let me put the anchor point in the right spot here. So this makes sense. It's going to sort of fall kind of like that, right? It's going to sort of, you see the bottom edge, ignore this top part for a minute. It's just going to sort of fall down like that, okay? And so what I thought might work is to take an ellipse, and I want it to be right in the center of my comp to make this easier to animate. So I'm going to just double click the ellipse tool, and it makes an ellipse the size of my comp. And then I'm going to double tap the U key. Let me just call this waterfall. I'm going to unlink the X and Y properties of the size, and I'm going to shrink the X way down like this, and I'm going to shrink it way down like this. Okay, so this is where it's going to start. So let's put a keyframe there, and let's go forward. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter how far we go forward. I'll show you why in a minute. But what I'm going to, you know, I kind of want to get a sense of the timing of this. So I'm going to go forward 1 second, and I'm going to stretch this way out, okay? And again, ignore this top part for a minute. Just think about the bottom. And okay, so now if we just ram preview this, right, this doesn't look like water falling. When things fall, right, let me first easy ease these and hop into the curves editor here. When things fall, they start off not moving, okay? And the curve is flat here, so that's correct. But then they just accelerate until they hit something. And this is a waterfall, so it's not really going to hit anything. And so what I needed to do, I just need this curve to accelerate all the way into this last keyframe. Okay, so that's what this curve is now doing. And I'm going to pull this out a little bit so that it kind of hangs for a minute. I'm also going to just nudge this curve a little bit off of perpendicular like that, so it's never totally static. Okay. All right, so now you look at that. There's a little bit of like an acceleration to it, and it doesn't feel fast enough. It's a little bit unnatural, so I might scoot that keyframe back a little bit, right? And you really have to use your imagination here. This doesn't look anything like a waterfall yet, but believe it or not, this is exactly how I made this thing, okay? Cool, so you start with that, and now I want to pre-compose this. All right, I'm just gonna call this 01 waterfall pre-comp, and if you don't know why I'm putting this 1 here, you should watch the tutorial in this series which deals with pre-comping, because I get into that. All right, so there's my pre-comp. Next thing I want to do is mask out the part of this that I don't want. Okay, so I'm just gonna grab my mask tool here, and I'm gonna get approximately in the center here, and I'm just gonna grab the bottom like that. Okay, so now let's take a look at that. So now that's what it looks like. Okay, and that's why I pre-comped it, so I could easily mask it. Cool. That's great. Okay, so while we're in this pre-comp, you know, this does not look like water. It's like, it's so perfect. It's just perfectly round. And if you were trying to make like super cartoony anime water or something, maybe that's what you'd want, but I don't want that. I want it to be a little bit, you know, turbulent like water. So what I'm gonna do is add a turbulent displace effect. And I could put it right on the layer, but what I usually do is I'll put it on an adjustment layer. So I'm gonna make an adjustment layer. Why don't we just call this turbulent? So I know what it is. The reason it's nice to put turbulent displace, which by the way is in the distort menu, turbulent displace, it's good to put it on an adjustment layer because what this effect does is it creates a noise field. It basically creates fractal noise, right? If you guys are familiar with that effect, creates fractal noise, and then it uses the fractal noise to displace the image that it's applied to. And if you put turbulent displace on, here, let me show you a quick example real quick. This is gonna be easier to just show you. All right, make an ellipse here. Let me just pre-comp it. Cool, so now I've got this nice ellipse shape. And if I put turbulent displace on this layer, and let's turn the size down a little bit, crank up the amount. If I move this around, you see how it's like it's displaced, but the displacement doesn't change at all. It's stuck to that layer. Versus if I add an adjustment layer, let me take this effect and just cut it, paste it on the adjustment layer. Here we go. Now, if I move that layer around underneath the adjustment layer, it will actually flow around the turbulent displace. Right? That's pretty slick, right? So so now we can get rid of this. So that's why I like to put turbulent displace on an adjustment layer, okay? So let's go back here. Here's my adjustment layer. And so let's crank the size down a little bit, right? Let's turn the amount up a little bit. And I found, I just sort of played with all these settings. I found that turbulent smoother kind of worked a little bit better, right? And look at that, see? And you can see that as it falls down, the edge of it kind of changes, but it does it in a way that feels a little more natural because it's moving through that noise. And if I wanted to, I could also animate the evolution a little bit, but I don't really need to. All right, so let's leave it like that for now. Cool. So here's what I'm trying to get at. What I want is an image where I see each frame of this animation, like this frame, then this frame, then this frame, then this frame, and I want to see them all kind of as a gradient, all put together, going from white to black or black to white, where I can kind of discretely see each individual frame, if that makes sense. And the reason I want that is because then I can put a colorama effect on that and cycle the colors. So first step, pre-comp this, right? So this is going to be O2. We'll call it waterfall turbulent. Cool. All right, so now I've got this pre-comped. So there's a bunch of different ways to do that. What I found worked pretty well. I was sort of thinking, I know that there's like some time effects here, right? Like there's this echo effect. And what the echo effect does, you set the number of echoes. So let's say I want, 8 kind of in-betweens for this animation. So I'm gonna say 8 echoes. And I want the echo time in seconds. I don't want it to echo things that have happened previously. I want it to actually look forward in time, right? And you can see that's not working, but that's because this decay is at 1, meaning it's actually, it's not really decaying at all. And what it means by decay is sort of fading out each echo. So if I lower this a little bit, there we go. You can see it's starting to work, and it kind of works, but I found the echo effect really weird. Like, this is kind of what I was going after, but it's sort of not doing it in a way that makes any sense to me, right? Like, I don't really understand why this number has to be so low. I have 8 echoes in there. I don't really see 8 layers here, so the echo effect wasn't working for me, so I killed it. And then I tried some other ones, and I found this wide time effect, which is really simple. Backward steps, I want 0, and then forward steps, I want 8 steps, right? And now I'm starting to see this actually gives me a little more control, and I actually can see 8 steps here. Now I don't see the 8 steps that I want. So then the next move is I need to actually speed up this animation. So I need to go back in here and move this keyframe back a little bit. And if I was smart and I wanted to be able to move that keyframe and see the result, what I would do is make sure that this comp is available down here in my timeline, lock the viewer with the little lock button, and then pop in here and just scoot this keyframe back until I get what I want, okay? And you can see now There we go. That's pretty much it. We're starting with the first frame of our animation is this white, like the brightest part. Then the second frame is a little darker, and the third frame is a little darker, and the third frame is a little darker, and it basically gets darker and darker and darker as time goes on, okay? And what this is, and you can see too that because I changed the animation curves so that there was acceleration throughout the animation, the shapes, the sort of gradation between the shapes it's thinner at the beginning of the animation, then it gets wider and wider and wider as time goes on, okay? If we jump closer and we go to full res, you can see that my turbulent displace is actually causing some of the second frame and the third frame to be above the first frame, right? So I may want to, with this lock still on, come here and mess with my turbulent displace settings, and maybe we can try bulge smoother. That was, that kind of fixed most of it. I could try turning the complexity down, or turn it up and see what that does. I don't like that. I like it back where it was. I can mess with the evolution just to see if maybe I can find a better value for it. All right, and if we kind of zoom out and look, right, not bad. And, you can mess with these settings, as much as you want. That's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to mess with the amount to get a little bit more, right? So anyway, so you mess with these until you get, oh, that's interesting, but terrible. Interesting yet terrible. All right, so let's just say this is what we want. We've got a little bit of variation to it. And you can see we've got exactly the shape we're looking for. And so now here's the problem. If I play this animation, this is the frame we want, but it goes away very quickly, right? And so what I thought I could do, and I'm kind of a big fan of showing you my screw ups here too. I think that's helpful. What I thought I could do was pre-comp this, right? Because it's got the wide time effect on it, and I could just call this 03 wide timed or something, right? And what I thought I could do was just time remap it, right? Command-Option-T enables time remap up. And before I do that, let me show you one thing I screwed up. Let me undo all these things I just did. So when I pre-comped this, Shift-Command-C, you have to make sure that you are moving all the attributes into the new comp, okay? So 03 wide timed, okay? So now this wide timed pre-comp does not have the effect on it. The effect is inside the pre-comp. Okay, that's what we wanted. And now what I thought I could do is turn on time remapping, so Command-Option-T, and then make this a hold keyframe. So hold Command, hold Option at the same time and click it, thinking, okay, well now it's just gonna hold on frame 0 and that should hold the frame we want. But as soon as I did that, you see what happened? Our beautiful gradient image went away. And I don't know why. I think it must be some sort of issue with the way the wide time effect works. It just doesn't work when it's, when you go up a level and you time remap it, it just stops working. So what I did something I normally hate doing, but every once in a while I have to, which is I just rendered this out. Before I render it out, I just want to point out something that this is not actually a darker color. If I hit the transparency grid, you can see it's actually transparent, and maybe that's hard to see. Let me fill this with a color real quick so you can actually see it. It's actually transparent, okay? It's not darker. And that's gonna come back and bite us in the butt a little bit when we jump into the Colorama, but I'll show you how to deal with that, okay? So what I'm gonna do, let me turn this back to full res for a second, and I'm gonna hit Command-Option-S. That's the keyframe for save a still frame. You'll notice if you watch my tutorials, I hate to use these menus up here if I don't have to. I always use the keyboard. It makes you much, much faster. So, all right, so I'm just gonna save a Photoshop file. And by default, just so you guys know, when you save a Photoshop file, it is saving the alpha channel. So it's saving that transparency. And let's save that in my color cycling folder. And we'll stick it in here. We'll just call this waterfall. Cool. All right. And now we've got that saved. So let's import that. Let's bring that back in. There it is. Okay, cool. So now let's make a new comp. and let's bring in our waterfall. Okay, so now I'm going to call this comp waterfall 02. And what I want to do is actually make a folder here in my comps folder. I'm not sure I've talked about this yet, but this is how I set up pretty much all of my After Effects projects. And at some point I'll get into it and I'll talk a little bit about why. But for now, I'm going to put all of these comps that I've used to make my waterfall, I'm going to put them all in a waterfall folder. The reason I want to do that is because then what if I want to make some ripples? What if I want to make some splashes? Well, I've got this setup here that I could just duplicate. It's going to make it a lot easier to copy this setup and reuse it, okay? And in fact, I might as well put an 04 in front of this, even though this 04 comp does not actually contain the 03 comp, at least I know sort of the order I'm supposed to do things in. All right, so excuse me. Here's my, I'm going through puberty while I do these tutorials. Here's the waterfall image we just rendered out. And now I'm ready to put the colorama effect on there. So let's just apply color correction, colorama, there it is. All right, so that didn't work at all, see? So the reason it's not working right now is because the input phase, it's trying to get the phase from the intensity. But the problem is the intensity looks at the brightness of a pixel, and the pixels technically all have the same brightness. They do have a different alpha channel, and so if you turn this on and you turn off this modify alpha option down in the modify section, now it'll leave the alpha channel alone. So by default, what it does is it looks at the intensity, which is the brightness and the alpha taken kind of together. But this modify alpha option that's turned on, it basically kills whatever alpha's there and creates a new one. All right, so if you turn that off, now you get this, which is closer to what we want. And actually, you know, if we go back into the web browser and we take a look at this, and I turn this down, right, it's at 1/4 cycle speed. And if you look really closely, like look in here, you can see a lot of transparency in this image. When it's playing kind of quickly, you almost don't notice it, but when it's going really slow, you can kind of see the layers that this artist built up to enable this waterfall to look very complicated. So I actually like the idea of having some transparency here, right? If I turn this transparency grid on, I can see that, I've got like this feathered transparency, which is cool because what if I, like layered a bunch of these, right, to create a waterfall, for example. All right, so let's look at the colorama settings here. So the output cycle, right? Right now, it's not actually doing anything except giving us red. And that's because it's getting the phase from intensity. If we switch that to get phase from alpha, now it's actually going to show us all of these colors, okay? And remember, when it was getting the phase from the intensity, it was looking at the color of the pixels, but the color of the pixels, they were all technically white. They just had different alpha channels. If I get the phase from the alpha channel, since the alpha channel is now different on each one, then we actually get the colorama effect. And if I now animate the phase shift, look at that. There's your waterfall, okay? So the next step is to create the right colors for a waterfall. And so there's all these presets. If you look in the output cycle section here, there's this use preset palette, and there's a ton of them they give you. And there's some really interesting ones that are actually pretty nice. This Caribbean one is not a bad starting point, right? But you can see there's like a lot of different cycles, and I don't really want it to go like from bright to dark to dark to bright to dark to really bright. I don't want it to do all that. So what I did is I just picked one of these simple ones here. Like I think I picked ramp blue. Right? It starts at this like ridiculously electric blue and it goes all the way around to black. So instead of doing that, I want it to start at white. Okay? And then pretty quickly, I want it to turn to kind of a nice lighter blue color. Right? Maybe this is kind of like a Caribbean blue. And then by the time it gets to the end, I want it to be, still in that family of blue, but I want it to be much darker. Okay. And then along the way, you can introduce a little bit of natural variation to it, which just kind of, makes it a little nicer. But now when I cycle this, right, You can see we're starting to get that effect, okay? Now it's not working perfectly yet, and so I'm basically just gonna play around with these colors a little bit until I get, the main problem I'm having right now is I'm not seeing enough of that white, I feel like. So I might actually click here, and basically all you do is you click around the perimeter of the circle and you can add more colors, and I'll just add another white color. So now I can create a bigger band of where this should be white. There we go. Cool. All right, that's pretty cool. Awesome. All right, so now here's some other settings. So first of all, if I turn off Modify Alpha now, because I'm using the Get Phase from Alpha, you can see now it basically brought all the colors to full brightness because now there's no alpha channel, okay? So I wanted to show you guys this is a cool option. A problem with this is now if I duplicate this waterfall layer and I move this over, it just looks like a solid, shelf of water, and it's not blending at all. And so let me turn the coloramas off for a second. And actually, the way I had this set up in my demo, let me delete this colorama effect. Let me turn this one off for a minute. What I actually did was I made an adjustment layer called colorama, and I put the colorama effect on that, right? And the reason I did that was because now I can just turn this off, and I can actually take all of these little waterfall layers like this, and I can kind of move them around and then turn the colorama effect on, and I can build little shelves of them, and little kind of pieces of them. And they're not blending together all that well right now. And so I found that when you have this Modify Alpha turned off, it gives them transparency, which is going to let them blend a little bit better, right? Here, let me just do a quick little test here. If I go back to the input phase and I animate the phase shift, you can see that they both kind of animate at the same time. And I want to start being able to preview this waterfall and see if it's actually looking like a waterfall. So what I'm going to do is actually keyframe. I'm not going to keyframe it. That's ridiculous. Why would I do that? But I am going to animate the phase shift. And whenever I have to animate something that I just want it to increase at like a constant speed, I use the simplest expression I know, which is hold Option, click the stopwatch, and you just type in time times a number. All right, so let's start by putting in time times 500 and see what happens. And if I do a RAM preview, let me switch this to half res so it doesn't take so long to RAM preview. But if I do a RAM preview, all right, it's animating automatically based on the time of the comp, okay? And that's actually not a terrible speed, so let's leave it at that. Now, one thing that is bothering me a little bit is they're both animating at exactly the same time, right? It just looks like a copy, right? It's just too obvious. So what I'd like to do is have this waterfall animated at a different kind of, maybe the same speed, but sort of have the animation start in a different place than this one. And I could just put the colorama effect on each layer individually and do that. But then that's going to be kind of a pain to like manually offset them and make them look the way I want. So what I did was I took the colorama effect and I put it on this waterfall layer. So let me just do that real quick. Put colorama back on there. Colorama. All right, let's just tweak the settings here. So the input phase on the colorama is going to come from the alpha. So remember, that's really all the information we have here. And then the output cycle, I don't want this crazy rainbow thing. I'm going to use the preset palette called an alpha ramp. What the alpha ramp is doing, this is kind of an interesting thing Colorama can do. It can actually ramp not just between a bunch of different colors, but also between a bunch of different alphas. So what it's ramping here is the color remains white all the way around the circle, but the alpha goes from like totally opaque all the way to totally transparent, which coincidentally is what this layer already had on it, right? So this colorama effect, it's not really doing much. The reason it does kind of change it a little bit is because by default, you have a setting that says composite over layer. And I don't know why that's on by default. Let's turn that off. And now the effect does nothing, right? Because what it's doing is it's mapping the alpha channel to a normal alpha channel. If we now phase shift it though, it's actually going to cycle the colors for us, okay? And now that I've cycled the colors, I can turn this colorama back on, and I can actually kind of offset this little waterfall piece individually, which is pretty cool. And so then the other thing I could do is I could maybe set both of these to screen, or I don't know. I think I played around with screen. I think I ended up with lighter color. And really all that does, if you have it on normal, there's an alpha channel, so it's not going to make much of a difference, but you can add them together. And sometimes you get different, you can kind of get different looks, like the way they blend together. And then the colorama is just going to act on that. So let's leave that on light. And now that I've offset this one, I have, like a different timing to it, right? And so it adds a little bit more depth to it. And you can also start to kind of play with the scale of these things. And so what I was thinking was, okay, this one here is going to kind of be the big main piece. And then there's going to be some little kind of offshoots coming off of it, right? Maybe one over there, maybe one over here. This one's a little bit smaller. And along the way, I'm going to change the input phase on each one so that they're never perfectly in sync. Okay. Let me duplicate that. There we go. And this colorama effect, for some reason, is kind of a render hog. So just know that it is gonna work a little bit slowly for you. All right, and then we can mess with this one. Right, and as we start looking, right, you're starting to get that nice kind of cascading waterfall look. Right? Pretty cool. Now looking at this, right, I'm thinking, all right, the bands here, I mean, this is pretty chunky. If we go back and look at this, look how nice and smooth and pretty that looks. So what that tells me is maybe what I should have done was, back in my pre-comps here, I should have had the wide time have a few more forward steps. So if I just crank this to like 16 instead of 8, and then what I need to do is go into this pre-comp and move this frame forward to at least frame 16. Right? Now if we look at it, you're going to get more of a gradation to it. Okay? So let me put the lock on this comp one more time and come back to this pre-comp and move this keyframe, turn this to half, and I'm going to move the keyframe until I get what I'm looking for. There we go. So now we got, we have a much nicer kind of flow to it. And now what I need to do is Command-Option-S, render that frame out. I'm just going to render right over this old one. Replace it, render it. It's giving me a warning saying you're about to overwrite something. That's fine. And then I'm just going to control click on this and say reload footage. So now if we go back to our, here we go, 04 waterfall 2. If we come back here, let me unlock my comp viewer. Oh, I know what I did wrong. I did something really silly, people. I'll tell you what I did. If we come back to this comp, I left this on half res. And by default, if you hold Command-Option-S, it's going to render at the current settings. What you can do, you can either turn your settings to full before you render it, or you can just switch it here to best settings instead of current settings. And render over waterfall, replace. There we go. And then we'll just control click, reload the waterfall. Go back to this comp. And now our waterfall has more variation in the colors. So it's going to look a little bit smoother. Right? And if you're super accurate computer game history buff, you might even say, well, it was in the 80s, right? I mean, you only had sometimes 8 colors. We're talking CGA monitors here, people. And then by the time you got to like Super Nintendo, you had 256 colors, which was a lot better. Cool. So this is starting to look pretty cool, right? All right, so I'll show you kind of the next step of this, right? So then what I did was I took this. So here's my waterfall comp. Let's make a new comp real quick, and we'll just call this scene. And what I did was I got this very nice picture off of the Creative Commons search engine on Flickr. And I'm just going to darken this real quick. I'm not going to do all of the compositing in this because it would make the tutorial much, much longer than it's already going to be. I'm just going to darken a little bit. And then I'm going to take my waterfall pre-comp and I'm going to put it over here. Okay. And I'm just going to tone back the transparency just a little bit, maybe to 80% or maybe 90%, just a little. Okay. And so you could see that, I can stick this wherever I want. I wanted it to kind of come over this ridge here, but I want it to look like it's actually coming over the ridge, right? And right now it's just got this straight line edge, which isn't going to work. So what I figured I would do is I'd use a mesh warp, which is an awesome effect. It's in the distort group, mesh warp. And it gives you this mesh and you can like pull points around and stuff. And the problem is you could see that the mesh goes all the way over all this empty stuff that you don't need. And so if all I want to do is change this top edge, it's going to be a pain because it's like, okay, well, I have all this extra garbage out here I don't need. So what I usually do if I'm going to do a mesh warp, let me delete that effect for a minute, is I first crop the comp. So it's only what I need. So let me go back into this comp for a minute. And here's how you crop a comp in After Effects. If you didn't know, you click this button here, right? Region of interest. This is one of these things like, I don't know. I don't even remember how I heard about it, but most people don't use it. Most people don't know about it. You set the region of interest on your comp, and what it actually does is it tells After Effects, this is the only part of my comp to render. In Nuke, region of interest is actually a pretty big deal, but in After Effects, it gets forgotten a lot. Once you've set that, you can now go to composition, crop comp to region of interest, and it crops your comp for you, which is awesome. The best part about that now is that back in my scene, that comp is only that big, and so if I add a mesh warp, the mesh warp is only that big. And so now I don't even need all these rows and stuff. Maybe we'll do 2 rows with 3 columns, right? That's all the detail we really need. And let's scale it down a little bit. And let me turn the transparency way down for a minute and zoom in here, right? And kind of move this roughly into place. And then now with the mesh warp, you can just kind of grab the points of it like this. And each point has a Bezier handle, so you can kind of smooth out. They need to update this effect though. Boy, is it a slow moving effect, and it's kind of buggy. Right, there we go. Okay, and then I can adjust that and adjust that, and I'm just trying to roughly get this waterfall to look like it's coming over that ridge there. There we go. Cool, and then, let me zoom out here. And then you can also, you can use it to kind of like just add a little more variation, right? And I know that I do want the water to reach all the way down to where the ocean is. So let's pull it down there a little bit. Cool. All right, and then we'll turn this back up to 90. Not 100, but 90. All right. And now we'll do a quick little RAM preview. We'll take a look at this. And so this is kind of the beginnings of your waterfall, right? And it's actually not working too bad, but there's not a ton of detail in it. So then, what I did was I duplicated this. Let's delete the mesh warp on the copy, and scale this one down a little bit. And actually, to get more variation in it, maybe I'll flip it horizontally, and I'll kind of move this one over here and maybe scale it so it's a little bit wider, right? It's shorter, but it's a little bit wider. And then I can play around with the transfer modes too. Maybe lighter color, no, because then you're seeing the mountain through it. Let's just leave it on normal for now. And then I probably do want a little bit of a mesh warp on there, and we'll just keep this simple 2 and 2, just so I can get like a little bit of a bend to it, so it's not so perfect, right? Cool. And then I definitely want to offset the timing of it, right? so that it's not perfectly in sync with this top one. And now what I might do is put a mask on it, because this top edge is like such a hard edge. So I'm just going to mask it out, and I'm hitting the F key. Once you draw a mask, if you hit F, it brings up the mask feather property, but it also lets you click this inverted button. So now I'm only seeing what is not masked, and now I can feather that in a little bit, right? And with that mask on there and with the feather, I can mesh warp it a little bit, and I could even come back into this first one here and mesh warp this one a little bit. And I'm just trying to blend these two pieces together. And then, I don't know, why don't I duplicate this one and make like a really kind of small little piece of a waterfall back here. And I'm going to copy and paste the mask from this layer onto this new one I just did. And then I'll just kind of maybe just play with the scale a little bit, just so it just looks like a little, like there's something extra back there. And let me stick that way in the back. There we go. And then let me offset it a little bit so it's not perfectly in line with the other two. Cool. All right, so this is sort of the workflow, and you know, it kind of looks okay, you know, and really the more detail you put into it, the better. You know, if you look at this example here, there's a lot more kind of turbulence to it, and so that's one thing that, you know, might be cool to actually go back and see if we can get more turbulence out of it. And here, I'll just show you how quick and easy that is actually. If we just come back to, let's see, so it's not in this comp, so it must be in the comp that's labeled 2. Yep, there it is. And why don't we just up the amount of the displacement, and we can play with the size and stuff. Now, what I don't want to happen, you see how we're getting all these little kind of disconnected pieces here, right? And so I'm gonna sort of play with the amount until that doesn't happen too much. The amount and the size, maybe a bigger size. That's better. Maybe try something like that. All right, and then if we look in the comp 3, you can see now it's a lot more turbulent looking. So now, let me set this to full. Command Option S, and we'll just save over that Photoshop file, replace it. And then reload. And then we'll just go back here. And now, oh boy, that is way better. That's way better, right? And, you know, some of the things that are kind of giving it away are like this hard edge here. And I don't know, it depends on kind of what your background image is and how transparent the water is and other things. Maybe that's okay, but you can always, it's actually kind of cool, you can always come back into your waterfall comp and let's figure out which piece that is. That looks like this piece here, right? And you can do the same thing I just did. You could grab a mask out the top, right? You can see computer's starting to chug. It's starting to hurt. Hit F, invert the mask, and then put like a 25 pixel feather on there. Maybe a little more, maybe 50. And something interesting's happening. It's not actually feathering. And I'm guessing that's because, whoa, there's an extra colorama effect on this guy. We don't want that. Let's get rid of that. Let's make sure, oh boy, we've got extra coloramas that we didn't need. So this mask doesn't seem to be working the way I'd hoped. So let me troubleshoot that real quick. Let's turn colorama off. Obviously it works with that off. And I'm guessing it's because modify alpha is turned on. If I turn it off, we're not going to get the result we want. All right, so in this case, because the colorama is on this layer and it's interacting with the alpha channel, if I put a mask on this, it kind of screws things up. So an easy kind of solution is let's make a new layer, just Command Y, make a new layer, temporarily set it to adjustment layer, and then put the mask on that layer. And then let's just rename this layer matte and select the layer that you want the mask on and just tell it to use this new layer you just made as an alpha matte. Now I can do the same thing. Hit F on the matte, invert it, and blur it, 30 pixels. And now we can turn all those other layers back on. All right, you can see now it's blending in there, right? So you can also do that and kind of blend your pieces together. And so you won't have these awful hard edges, you know. And some of that is sort of okay, especially if you're going for this 8-bit color cycling look, because that's, you know, all those little funky visual artifacts kind of happened in those games a lot of the times. One of the next steps I would do is just pre-comp all of this, call it waterfall. And that way you can do things like, here, let me show you. I'll show you a little bit more. Why not? I've gone this far. I'm going to add adjustment layer over this whole shebang, because now if I want to start actually comping this in there and trying to see how it's going to look, it'll be easier if I can get a better sense of what the final thing's going to look like. So what I'm going to do is add an adjustment layer, and because we're going for pixel art here, there's a great effect called Mosaic. It's in the stylized group, Mosaic. And by default, it gives you this 10 by 10 mosaic. I'm going to make it, now what I was originally going to do was 320 by 240, because that was kind of the default resolution of games. But computer monitors, a lot of people, especially if you're my age, computer monitors, if you remember, used to not be rectangular shaped. They were more square shaped. They were 4 by 3 like old TVs. So 320 by 240 would be a 4 by 3 ratio. If we want 16 by 9, I think it's more like 360 by 240 or something like that. And then if you click sharp colors, it basically, if you don't have this on, it's a subtle difference, but excuse me, I have a frog in my throat. If you don't have this on, it looks like it's doing some filtering to the image, and it sort of softens it. If you turn that back on, it makes it very crisp and hard, like an old computer game. And you can see that already it's sort of giving that waterfall a more computery look. See, if I turn that adjustment layer off, it's nice and smooth, and if I turn it back on, it looks very pixely. On top of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to stylize and hit posterize, okay? And that's going to take away a lot of the color. So right now what it's doing, it's only allowing 7 colors to exist, basically. And that's not enough. Let's set that to 16. All right. And so that's sort of 16, I believe, is like Super Nintendo level. And back in the day, I got to tell you, that was pretty cutting edge. So then, now that the waterfall's all on one layer, you can grab your mask tool, you can mask it out. Oh boy, computer's starting to feel pain. And in this situation, part of the reason that it's chugging is also because I'm screen recording at the same time, but it's not a bad idea. Once you get your waterfall exactly how you want it, you can pre-render it. And if you don't know how to do that, maybe I'll show you guys how to do that in another tutorial. So let me take the mask I just drew now. I'm going to select it. I'm just going to hit shift and the down arrow and just nudge it down so it's kind of closer to the water there. And I'll feather the edge a little bit, but I'm not terribly concerned with it because, I knew going in I was going to create some ripples. I was going to create some of that splash. And I did all of that stuff exactly the same way. And you can see it's so funny. Whenever I make these tutorials, I do it first, and then I'll show you guys how to do it. And it always looks better, I think, when I show you, because it's the second time I've done it. I think that looks way better. So yeah, there you go. We're getting something now, people. So you can see, though, with like the combination of the pixelization, the posterizing, layering these things, and maybe feathering some of the layers into each other, you're getting a pretty good result. And this is just one layer of stuff happening. This doesn't even have our our little ripples down here and kind of the steam coming off the water, the splash. And of course I did a lot of other things. I color corrected the mountains, and I added a different sky because this sky kind of looks like crap when you posterize it. But this waterfall is way better. So anyway, I hope through all of my rambling and creating this sort of one-off, almost useless in the real world effect, I hope that you could kind of get a little glimpse at least the way my brain works with how I approach creating an effect I've never created before. I swear to you, I did not know how to do this before. I did it today to come up with this tutorial, and
And it's really just learning how to observe other people's work and breaking it down into small pieces that you do know how to do. You know, if you look at this, you know, just all by itself, it's the first time you see it, it's kind of overwhelming. It's like, I have no idea how you would even approach that. But I slowed it way down. Luckily, this artist was nice enough to create these buttons so you could slow things down. And I really looked at the palette and I just stared at it. And I said, oh, look, it's the same colors, just cycling. Hey, what effect in After Effects would let me do that? Oh my gosh, there's a Colorama effect. And I just built on it and built on it until you get something like this. And one other thing I completely forgot to mention, which is just a quick thing, is let's go back to this comp here and let's look at the Colorama effect here. And one thing that's kind of cool, so if I just RAM preview this, right? You'll notice that if you look at the white part, which is sort of the foamy leading edge of the water that shows you that it's moving, there's only one on each piece at a time. And that's because if you go to the output cycle, the default setting for this output cycle is there's one repetition, but you can increase that. You can make that as many as you want. I just increased it to 5 and that's too many. Let's increase it to 2. And so what that's going to do is it's going to create more than one of these edges, and it's going to kind of increase this, like the speed of it, but it's also going to increase the frequency of those colors, which could be interesting. It might make it look a little bit more turbulent. You can also set this to less than 1, right? And so then it sort of spreads the colors out more, right? And so now it maybe slows down the animation a little bit. Cool. And for a waterfall, who knows? I mean, maybe that's what you want. And the great thing is you can always just do that and then come here and RAM preview it and see what it looks like, you know, and you know, that's one of the things I love about After Effects is that it's pretty easy to set up this complex chain of things that you just go back a few comps, change one thing, and now you get something like this. So anyway, I'll stop talking now. Thank you guys so much for hanging out, and I hope this was cool. I hope you learned some tricks, and maybe, I don't know, I bet a bunch of you have never used Colorama before, so hopefully now you know what it does, and you're not afraid of it. And on top of that, I want to say that I hope you guys experiment with After Effects and try to figure out how to do things you've never done before. So thank you guys so much. I will see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope that was cool, and maybe 8-bit color cycling will actually come in handy, but hopefully what you really learned are some strategies on how to troubleshoot and figure out new things in After Effects. If you have any questions or thoughts about this lesson, definitely let us know. And if you learned something valuable from this, please share it around. It really helps us spread the word about School of Motion, and we appreciate it more than words. Don't forget to sign up for a free student account to access the project files from the lesson you just watched, and I'll see you next time. Peace.